Hi, I'm Helen.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast, a weekly podcast where we talk about the ins, outs, ups and downs of work and share some ideas for action, some tools for you to try out to give you a little bit more confidence and control over your career development. And this week, we are diving into the world of artificial intelligence. That needs a tune. Maybe I should have got an AI.
That we are, to be honest.
I can't believe I got you to do it.
Could be recording this. I
know. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's not me. No, it definitely. I feel like it might be slicker. If it was AI, then there's
so much slicker.
So much slicker than what might be coming. Yeah, I'm quite surprised that I persuaded you to do this. And then you've gone off and discovered loads of other stuff. I'm very impressed with your commitment to the podcast this week.
Well, open mindset and all that.
So we'll tell you a little bit more about what we have done and learnt and how it will help you with your development in a minute. But Sarah, I know that you have some good news for our listeners.
I do indeed. So, Squiggly Career book. We have turned the Squiggly Career into a video book. I say we didn't do any of the production, which is why it looks incredible and has interesting animations. It has us on screen doing drawings. It has loads of Squiggly Career stories. And if you've not come across a video book before, it really does what it says on the tin. It's about 50 minutes long. It's all broken down into videos for each of the chapters. You get to download all of the exercises and the workbook. We think it's a really interesting and inclusive way of learning because it's really visual. You can break it down. It feels really bite-sized. You can actually download it and also watch it offline, which I think is quite helpful for people's commute and things like that. And very handily, for 4 weeks, everybody who listens to the podcast can get a free copy of the Squiggly Career video book. So if you want to try it out, basically, and just see whether it's helpful for you, you can get the Squiggly Career. And then obviously, if you want to look at other ones, you can do that. So how to get your free video book of the Squiggly Career? You need to go to litvideobooks.com. So lit is LIT and then videobooks.com/the-squiggly-career. Of course, we will put that URL in the show notes and we'll share it when we share this podcast episode. And then basically you click to buy. You go to your cart to do your checkout and you create an account. And then your code, all capitals, is Squiggly Careers podcast. So I know that's probably always a bit tricky to listen to and to jot that down. So maybe this is the one time we think, we'll look at those show notes for the first time ever, because I know that's not something that I do in a podcast very often. Or you can always email us, Helen and Sarah at SquigglyCareers.com. If you get a bit lost, you can't find it. And you can use the video book on either website or mobile with the same login. So hopefully it'll feel helpful. I hope that feels like a useful thing for our listeners, and we would love some feedback. So if you do get your free copy, if you've had a chance to watch it, we'd love to know your reflections, what works well about it, any even better ifs, whether you think it's something you would use again in the future. So hopefully a good little extra squiggly bonus to start this week's episode.
Ooh, a squiggly bonus, free learning in exchange for feedback. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. So it is a topic getting loads of attention. And to be honest, I've sort of heard people talking about it and I've almost been thinking, do you know what? I need to look into that a little bit more. It's been on my learning list for a while. Oh my gosh, is ChatGPT going to replace career coaching? And what is this going to mean for the future of our business? And I should probably look into this. But it sort of felt, very noisy on lots of social media websites. And I wasn't really sure where to start with it, but I thought, it's worth experimenting with. So the reason we're covering this is because we do think there is some potential value in some of the tools that are driven by artificial intelligence that could help you with your development. But we wanted to road test it for you first. So we wanted to take lots of different, I called it use cases, and Sarah's like, that sounds way too technical. Lots of different things that you might do in your day-to-day, basically the normal stuff that you would do, and then take all these tools that everyone's talking about and work out, are they actually useful? Is it a lot of noise or is it helpful? Because if it is helpful, then maybe we should bring these into our work, into the way our teams work, and just get a bit more comfortable with them. And if it isn't helpful, maybe we should just do what we do really well as humans and stop getting distracted by all the headlines. So we are your guinea pigs. We have road tested these things for you, and we're going to be as practical as possible about what we think about them.
And I think I really remember a few years ago hearing the chief creative officer of Facebook, and they were called Facebook at that time, talking about the importance of play and how when you play with tech, you really get a feel for what it does and how it works. So as much as I think you can read about AI, and I've done a bit of reading and I've read a few articles and seen people share kind of different points of view and perspectives on, the ethics of AI or how it can work alongside us rather than sort of against us, or how it can make our lives easier. But I do think it's only when you have a go that you just get a real idea for the stage that technology is at, how it might help for, whether it doesn't work for you. And so I think that is almost like the main message that I'd encourage everybody to have a think about when you're listening, like almost in a very no pressure sort of way. Can you have a play, a bit like Helen and I have done? And honestly, the more I've sort of played with everything, the more fun I've had, because I've not felt like, oh, I must be doing this because I feel like it's going to replace me tomorrow. I felt more, oh, well, how can it help me? Sort of starting off with an optimistic mindset of thinking, well, hopefully there's some good stuff to be learned along the way. That has definitely been true. Certainly for somebody who's sort of, I'm not as into tech as Helen is, but I think, well, if I've enjoyed it, I reckon everybody else can too.
So what we'll do is we'll go through the situations when we think you can use this stuff, and we'll talk about the tools that we tried out, and then we will summarize it all for you. So in the pod sheet, which you can get from our website, amazingif.com, you'll find all of the links there. And then if you follow us on social media at amazingif on Instagram or amazingif, our LinkedIn page, we'll do a pod note there so that you'll be able to download it and you'll be able to try out these tools and find them really easily. But yeah, it's more about having a play, having a go, experimenting, and just sort of enjoying it, seeing what happens. I think that's what Sarah and I have done. And also Sarah and I haven't really talked about this, so I don't know what she thinks of the tools that she's tried out. So I'm listening and learning at the same time as you. So Sarah, the first thing that you did was used AI to help you write a CV.
Yeah, so I use something called Kick Resume. And we've done a what worked well, even better if, obviously, for each of the AI tools. Who knew the AI could probably do the what worked well, even better if for you of their own tool, which gets a bit meta if you think about it like that. But what I really liked about Kick Resume, and generally when I've looked at CVs, there are now so many examples to borrow brilliance from. I actually think there's no excuse to not have a decent CV now, because there are expert guides that you can read on Kick Resume. So it does give you content. I think that content is written by humans. I think it is, because they describe the experts. I don't think they're made up experts. I was like, oh, what's real and what's not? But I think the expert guides are written. There's loads of examples. There's loads of templates. And then what you can do, which I did try, is you can turn your LinkedIn into your CV. Ooh. And they show you step by step how to do it. I followed those steps and I could do it. Who knew you can download all of your data from LinkedIn? But you can. So I sort of have this file on my computer now with like all of my LinkedIn. You literally pop it into Kick Resume. You choose the template that you want. So obviously I love doing that. I loved picking. I was like, oh, which one do I want? And I was looking at the design. Obviously I quite like looking at the design stuff. And then it sort of puts everything in there for you. Now, is it 100% right? Is it a CV I would ever send to anyone? Of course not, because it's basically, it can only take and sort of scrape the data that's there. So would I want to personalise it? Yes. Are there some things you change? Of course. But it does do, I reckon, 60 to 70% of the hard work for you if your LinkedIn is up to date. So, because obviously it's put in all the dates, it's put in all the roles. It gives you so many suggestions of like, well, you could do it a bit like this, or here's how to write a really good cover letter, here's how to write a really good summary. The majority of what I've found on Kick Resume and on other places is free. Like most of the time, there are some free things that you can access. And then usually at some point, you hit a paywall, because I assume at some point they have to make some money. And so paywalls might be, oh, if you wanted 10 different templates, or if you wanted lots of examples of cover letters. The only thing I would say I found when I was particularly looking at CVs and cover letters, because I guess they're an obvious application for AI, is it almost becomes overwhelming. I was like, wow, there are like 100 different options for what my CV should look like. Some which you can quickly discount, but I was like, well, how do I know if that one's better than another one? I mean, they do go quite far. They actually, on the CV templates, they put logos and they'll say, oh, like a CV in this format, like this person was like hired by Adidas. And they like name the brands, and they name like, basically they're saying, this has worked. It's sort of a stamp of approval, which I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. So I think my conclusion on the CV and cover letter stuff was, it's a great place to start if you're feeling a bit stuck. I think it would challenge you to maybe consider doing a CV in a slightly different way, or maybe including some things like skills or capabilities in different ways. I definitely saw stuff that I thought, oh, I'd borrow that idea. Do you still need to do some of the heavy lifting to really make sure it reflects you and it tonally feels right for you? Yes, but I still felt like there was lots of useful stuff to be had.
And you said you connected to your LinkedIn and then it got you sort of 70% there with the CV that you would then need to personalise. How long did that process take, like from logging on, connecting with LinkedIn?
So there was like a 3-step process, which I did the first 2 steps, and then you sort of have to wait 24 hours to get the download from LinkedIn. So you couldn't do it all on the same day. So I did it yesterday. I got the files today from LinkedIn. They both came through. That was really easy. You literally drag and drop them into Kik Resume. The CV appears then straight away in the template. If you wanted it that day, you wouldn't be able to do it. But within 2 days, you can.
Interesting. Okay, so imagine you've got this amazing CV that you have got from Kik Resume, and then you've improved it yourself with your very human skills. Then you get an interview. So the next bit of AI we need is to help us prepare for an interview. And I used interviewschool.com. So I went onto the website. I did it like before the paywall. So there is a paywall thing where you get loads of different like interviews that you can take. I just sort of went with one that was available to everybody. So Sarah, I interviewed for a sales executive at Verizon, and I sat there at my kitchen table, and this AI man interviewed me for the job. And it was honestly, it was so real that my little boy Henry came up to me and was like, "Mummy, is this live?" And I was like, "No, but get out. I'm being interviewed by AI. Get out of the screen.
Don't interrupt me. I want to pass this interview. I want to win."
Well, do you know what? It got a little bit like that. So this man, AI, was asking me a series of questions that would, give me practice in terms of answering for this job as a sales executive. And I actually felt a little bit under pressure. So he asked the question. There was
That's probably
things
a good thing though, right?
Yeah, and they were actually quite good questions. But he'd say like, talk about a time when you've negotiated for something you wanted at work. And then you then answer it. And whilst you are answering it, he's like nodding and like moving his head in quite a realistic way.
Weird.
It's so weird. And then you do your answer, and then you press like next question, and then he comes at you with the next question. And it does feel a little bit like he's coming at you with the next question, because like if you were interviewing me, there would be a bit of rapport.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I might ask you a question, you might ask a follow-up question on what I've said. So there's a natural flow that maybe creates connection in an interview, whereas this was like an interrogation for a sales job a little bit. But equally, he asked me about 6 or 7 questions. They were good questions. They made me think about my answers. And then you got feedback on the clarity of your answers, on keywords, on like your pace, all those sorts of things. So actually, I think it is quite good preparation for you to feel a little bit more confident. It's sort of like a role play that no one else sees. And I would have come up with more ideas as a result of doing that than if I'd just turned up at the interview with the real person. Yeah. So I think it was good. You, like I say, I just did one of the ones that were available. And I think if you pay, you get access to more sort of specific jobs, more specific prep. But I think it's worth it. I would recommend Interview School if you have got an interview coming up to practice your skills, feel confident in your answers.
Anything that you didn't like or that didn't quite work for you?
The report that is supposed to generate a report for me, and that took quite a long time. It said it was going to take it in 15 minutes, and it took a long time. And so I thought, oh, some of it's not quite there yet. Like the idea and the opportunity is pretty impressive, but some of the tech's not quite there yet, still a little bit glitchy. So that was probably a sort of an even better if on that platform. But I think it's very, very nearly there. No, I think just I wouldn't want to think. It made me think 2 things actually. It made me think, oh gosh, actually interviews are nicer. So I wouldn't want someone to think that was what an interview is going to be like, that you have to be interrogated, because I think it is important that you ask questions back, and it is important that there's rapport, and you get none of that. And then the other thing that it made me think was, what if companies start doing this as like the first round?
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
When they've got to do filtering, surely companies are going to start using it.
And I'm not sure people like you and me, I think we would come up with ideas, and we would, it would be the bouncing between people that would probably help us to be at our best. And so I made me think, oh gosh, if companies are going to start use this as like first round screening, I feel like that could screen out people that might be really good, because that's just not a particularly comfortable way of communicating for some people. So that's my only little not 100% sure
Red
about
flag.
it. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And I think back to your point about usability, I found a real difference with everything I tested. I got very annoyed if it's too hard to test. So I think with all of them, when it's easy to access and it's easy to have a go at, if they've basically removed barriers to entry, they're all the ones that I got most involved in, started playing with loads more. When they were making you like sign up, and I'm sure it's because they all want your data, but there was like loads of like hoops to go through, I just sort of lost interest. Or I was like, oh, you're making this too hard for me to even test out. And I think with a lot of them, because they are at quite early stages, the ones that are really smart are just making it really easy to test and just to kind of have some fun with.
Okay, so we've written our CV, we've done our interview, we've got the job. We're now in like the day-to-day of our work, and we are probably in back-to-back meetings. We're doing presentations, we're doing Teams calls, we're doing Zoom calls. So how can AI help us now? Well, it can help you to improve your communications in the meetings. There is one tool that I paid for, and it is poised.com, because I was so intrigued about how could this help me improve my presenting skills, my communications, and it's really good. It's really, really, really good. This is one of my favourites.
You got so enthusitic about this. I was like, she absolutely loves whatever this is.
I'm not sure you're going to love
this.
Tell
us more.
All right. Okay. So you go on poise.com, and I think I paid like £15, and I'll turn it off soon because I just did it for the benefit of our listeners. And what it does is you connect it to your Microsoft Teams and your Zoom account. But that was pretty simple. Didn't take me long to do that. And then it sits in the background of your meetings.
No.
I know you're not going to like this. Wait. So it sits in the background of your meetings, and every one of your meetings, it's recording just you, not the other people, just you. And what it does two things. So real time, you get feedback on your pitch, your pace, your filler words, your domination of the discussion, like real time. You can see this all flashing up. And then afterwards, what it does is it saves all the insights on a dashboard, and it gives it like a score. So you can see overall what was your communication score.
I'm looking at yours now because you've given me a diagram to look at.
I know. And then you get loads of feedback on like your confidence and clarity and all this kind of stuff. Mine's a little bit misleading, I think, because a lot of what we do on Zoom is we present, we're presenting squiggly sessions. So it's slightly misleading. But I could just delete those squiggly sessions and look at it more as like actual conversations and meetings. And that would probably give me a fairer. But unsurprisingly, Sarah, I score quite highly on like the energy of my communications and quite badly on my pace, because most of my feedback is that I should slow down a little bit, which is, not new news to you, real friend, not AI friend. So yeah, I would really recommend it.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I really don't agree with in the moment feedback, because that's so counter to, today I was talking to a group about the importance of being present and, distraction downfalls, and how the quality of our attention equals the quality of our thinking. And so if you suddenly are giving real-time pop-up feedback that is distracting you from a conversation, especially if you're already somebody who is quite easily distracted. And I always ask people, like, how often are you interrupted in a day? Essentially what that is doing is interrupting you. So I am very anti that.
But you can turn it off.
In terms of focus. Yeah, if you can turn that bit off.
Yeah, you
can.
That's every time I have also found that distracting. But I'm just looking at it now. I think it's actually recording me now, hilariously. But I'm looking at it.
I'm getting recorded, and I don't even know.
Not
this
you.
is exactly why we need ethics.
It doesn't record you. It just records me.
I know.
But it says, like here, I did a session earlier, and it says you could have sounded more confident by intentionally pausing to breathe. It helps you feel in control of your message. And then it has
breathe,
a little
Helen.
statement.
God damn it, breathe.
Breathe. It has a little statement that I said, and then you can play back. It records just that little clip. So the advice it gives you, it like just snips that little bit so you can play it back and listen to it. It is really, really smart. And I do think that is useful. I think it's useful as well. Like, I think I would recommend this to people.
I feel like I might have a go at that one. Turn off automatically straight away the live feedback thing, because I don't agree with that. I don't understand how that could ever be useful for the way that our brains work and what we know about our brains. But I do think sometimes I've got some hypotheses about some things that I think I do, but it'd be really great to get feedback on those things that I think are unhelpful. So no, like you were saying, well, maybe I do know about pace, but maybe it's really reinforced that. Like, I think I'm not as good when I'm meeting someone for the first time, because I think I get nervous and I think I interrupt too much. And I think I dominate some conversations more than I would like to. So maybe just having, like data for your development. We talk about having data. It gives you some really specific data for your development. And then presumably you could then look at it over time and see if you're getting any better.
Yeah, because you get a score.
That
so
bit
you
I
see
like.
your scores improving. The filler words is really useful as well. Like mine are often so's and like it doesn't always make comfortable reading, but actually, that's good for your development.
I'm going to do that one. I like.
Yay!
I like 50% of it, and not the other 50%. So now, with the help of AI, you have your dream job. You're smashing that dream job, and you're thinking about, well, where shall I go next? How do I explore my career possibilities? And so for career possibilities and thinking about where your career could take you, I used a tool called wouldyoratherbe.com. And this really encourages you to explore the art of the possible. So it kind of makes you go through a careers quiz, asking you loads of questions about yourself, but also about lots of different kinds of jobs. And it is like, would you rather? So it's like, would you rather be a beautician or an engineer? And then it gives you a short paragraph about what of those jobs involve. So you do get a bit of a feel for, I think, well, I don't know what it looks like to be an engineer. And it will describe, the sorts of things you might do, kind of spending your time doing those roles. And it definitely broadened your thinking about all the different types of jobs that are out there. I would say of everything I tried, it was the one that I enjoyed the least, because it was a lot of just clicking through. So it was like, literally, would you rather millions of these questions, like career advisor, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe that one, or sports star, and I was like, well, if you're giving me sports star, maybe. So they're quite dramatically different, and they try and motivate you to keep going, because they obviously need more data, I guess, to try and then be useful. And then they sort of categorize them into, oh, you would like creator jobs, for example. And then they give you lots of ideas for, okay, well, if you wanted to do creator jobs, here are loads of examples of what that could look like. It was reminiscent for me of really career advice that you do at school, but maybe slightly more sophisticated. And I wasn't then sure what I would then do with it. I think if I maybe never had a job before, it might, if you're really starting from scratch, maybe it would help you. But I did have to fill in a lot of stuff about me at the start that was all on LinkedIn. And I'd actually thought, I hadn't even done the other tool yet. And I was like, surely this could just, does it not just know this? I was like, by this point, I'm expecting AI to be super smart and just know this. And some of it felt, I was a bit worried, some of it felt not as inclusive as it could be, because I did get asked quite a lot of questions about things like my qualifications. And I was like, oh, but surely we will sort of want to give people options and opportunities that are not just based on their education level. So I struggled a bit with the sort of this, like how I'd find this useful, the kind of so what of this. I would almost like to hear from somebody perhaps who, maybe if you were at school and you're not even thinking about your career when you're 16, 17, 18, unless you're very vocationally focused, I guess. But maybe at that point, I could imagine it might be a bit more useful, because it does sort of just show you all of the different things, means you don't limit yourself too soon. There were lots of different styles and roles, but I wasn't sure about this one. It was, and it might just be that I'd not seen the potential. And you do have the same thing of like, am I using this in the right way? But it didn't work for me, and I couldn't think of anyone who I would then almost recommend it for.
It doesn't sound as useful as like a more retro curious career conversation. Like I'm going to go and have a couple of curious conversations, and I'm going to find out how you got to where you got to and what you did and what you've learned, and think about whether that could be a good fit for me in my future. I feel like I would get more value having a couple of curious career conversations in quite an analog way than using this AI would you rather be solution.
Yeah. And it sort of said to me, it really did tell me things I already knew. So it did say, oh, you'd probably quite like jobs where you get to create. And I just think a lot of people would already know that. And then it was giving me these sort of very wide range of roles, but maybe not the support with how to get there or then what I might do. And most people are coming from, they're doing something today. And I was like, oh, now I'm being told I need to go and do set design. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that feels quite far from where I am right now. But again, maybe we're not the audience. So maybe if you are listening and you're at the start of your career, have a go and see if you have a different experience. Or if you know someone who's at the start, perhaps share it with them and let us know whether they found it useful.
One tool that I use to explore career possibilities as well, sort of thinking about what I might want to do in the future, is I used Google Bard, which I think is actually quite like ChatGPT. There's like, I think you have to join a wait list, but then you immediately get an email that goes, and now you're on the list.
It's just a really short wait.
Yeah, I don't know whether they're trying to play with some psychology of like, I've been accepted into a club. I don't know, but basically you go onto Google Bard, you join the wait list, and then within about 2 minutes you're in the group. And I asked it, I thought, do you know what I'll imagine I want to work at Microsoft. Like one of my career possibilities is to work at Microsoft. And I thought I will ask it about what it's like to work in marketing at Microsoft in the UK, what the company culture's like, what the pros and cons are of working for Microsoft. And I thought, you know what, I will compare what it says with my actual experience of working in that organisation. And it was pretty accurate. It was pretty accurate because Microsoft's quite nuanced in that the countries, you have like what I think of as like big Microsoft in Seattle, and then you have the countries, which are kind of sales engines for the businesses. And the culture, I would say, in the countries is quite different to the centre of the business. And it picked up on those nuances in a really, and I don't know how, but it picked up on those nuances about the difference of working in sort of in-country roles versus in central company roles. The pros and cons were very reflective of my experience. So I actually thought if you had a wish list of like 5 companies you wanted to work in and you were trying to work out, well, what could culturally be a good fit and what might working like there look like, I think using a tool like Google Bard, ChatGPT probably does the same thing. Definitely time well spent.
I got asked that very question today. So after a workshop, someone came up to me and said, if I was trying to get a feel for a culture for a company, anything that you'd recommend. And actually I said, well, have a look at Glassdoor because, that'll give you a bit of a feel. Can be a bit extreme, but it'll give you a bit of a feel. And I said, go and have some curious career conversations. So look for people who have maybe worked there previously, because that's always really interesting because then they've got no vested interest, or who work there now, who you think, be prepared to be kind of honest with you about their experiences. But that would have been a really good build. Because I think all of you, this is not about just doing one thing, right? We're not going, don't have conversations anymore. Yeah. But, if you were like, oh, well, I've looked at that Google Bard. I'm not sure why is it called Bard, by the way?
Well, isn't B-A-R-D? Bard like a scholar? If you're a bard, like B-A-R-D.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I think
I've learned something new today. I don't know. I don't feel like it's a very, it's not a very universal word, is it?
Wasn't Shakespeare a bard? We should probably know. Should we go on Google Bard and ask what a bard is?
I just think it's quite a weird word, right? It's not like it's like an everyday word.
Well, I mean, anyway, ChatGPT is not really catchy, is it?
No, I know. I find that really hard to say, so I think they should rename it. I'm obsessed with them renaming these things into more useful things that are easy to remember. But I do think that is a really helpful, getting a feel for fit. We always talk about that. Be really active about exploring, like get a feel for what somewhere's really like, and if it helps you to do that, I can see that being really useful.
So next up, we're going to think about, in your average day, how can AI help you to save time? What's interesting here is I used a tool that I think could be quite useful, and Sarah has used the same tool for a different purpose. So the tool is WordTune, and Sarah, what did you use it for?
Writing and summarising.
Okay, so wordtune.com is the tool. Let me tell you how I used it to save time. So I was reading, I'd seen a report from the World Economic Forum, which I wanted to read. I think it was something you shared on our Teams channel, Sarah, about skills and things. And I looked at it and I was like, 296 pages. That's a beast of a read that I'm not going to be able to do. And I thought, I've got to test these tools for the podcast. And one of the things that WordTune does is it summarises PDFs, reports, websites.
Yeah, I know. And so I tried that too.
And so I just added this 296-page World Economic Forum report, and within, 30 seconds, maybe less, it had summarised it all for me. And I was like, wow, that's pretty useful. Now, when I say summarised, it hadn't done like one paragraph. It didn't condense the 296 pages into one paragraph. What it did is it summarised every page. So I could scroll down it and I could be like, okay, so page 1, that's the key takeaway. Page 2, that's key takeaway. So I still had to scroll down. But what I found it was quite useful was I was able to go, that page 36, that looks like probably that's the most relevant for me. And I could go and spend like more time reading the pages that were relevant. It was a good first filter. What I don't think it did was gave me the final answer that I would want to get to. So when I'm reading a report, I'm looking, my particular, I guess, thing that I'm trying to get out of it is key stats and statements that are really sticky. And I think for me, I was like, oh, that feels like a Helen human skill to be able to read that report and go, oh, that's a sticky stat. I can write a LinkedIn post on that. Or, oh, that's a good idea. There's a nugget in that we can use in a podcast in the future. And so that curiosity connecting dots thing, it doesn't do that. It basically collects lots of dots and summarizes them for you, but it misses that, I don't know, it misses the stuff that makes it really interesting, because I think it almost condenses it in quite a generic way. Really good for saving time. I do think it was really useful, but I don't think it replaces the need to read and pick out the points that capture interest.
So I absolutely love it. I am very, very on board with Word to Tune, as it turns out. I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I do think it, so basically I could tell you so much about it. I spent so much time on it.
I have never seen you so excited about technology.
So you can put in, I just think it's really, I think I'm like blown away by how clever some tech is sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, it's just so clever. So you can put in a paragraph, for example, and it can rewrite. So it can literally rewrite a sentence, and it gives you lots of options. That's what I really like about it. It doesn't just go, here's a rewrite. It goes, well, here's 3 rewrites. You choose the one that you like the best. You can shorten. So you can literally click on a button that says shorten, and it just kind of makes it more, condensed and simple. You can expand it. You can use casual or formal tone. I loved playing around with that. Obviously, I preferred the more kind of casual tone. And so I used it on an example. So very specifically, so someone in our team at Amazing If recently asked me to rewrite something for them. They were like, oh, I'm struggling a bit to articulate this thing. Sarah, can you have a go at rewriting it? And I was like, yeah, really happy to do that. I do that quite a bit for people. I'm sort of broadly okay at writing, not amazing, but okay. So then I was like, would this be better than me? So I know what I've written. So then I could test myself against it. By that point, obviously, I was getting quite competitive. I was like, do I beat the bot, basically? Can you beat the bot? Turns out probably not. For something like writing, I looked at it and I was like, well, if we had used this as a team, you've got to know your own tone, you've got to know your own style. But I looked at it and I was like, yep, there are 2 or 3 here that are pretty good, and that you then need to tweak a tiny bit. But I was thinking, I think somebody could do that for themselves, then they wouldn't need me. And then I spend time on things that are adding even more value than me rewriting some sentences. And so as much as like you can do it, I was like, well, it's just better. I mean, I was making Helen laugh because I wanted to do it at the start and she wouldn't let me at the podcast. I put our podcast intro into it. I was like, how would you introduce Squiggly Careers podcast? I then put what we sometimes say and I put that into it. I was like, all of these things are better than what we do. Reid Hoffman, one of the founders of LinkedIn, has written a book. I think he's written a book using ChatGPT. I think that's what he used. It's quite hard to tell sometimes. It's not written by a person. I do think their copy skills, when you're writing simple, straightforward things, do they write creative copy? I've got to hope still that kind of humans can do that. But I don't know. I was like, oh, is this going to help us write our next book? Maybe. It's better than you think. And I'm someone I would be naturally so anti that. I'd be like, well, and I'd back myself. I'd be like, well, no, my writing will always be better. They won't get our tone. The more I've used it, the more I'm like, maybe it should write our next book. Maybe we should stop writing books because the AI will just do it for us. It's really made me question life. This one has. I was just like, oh, I've got so many questions.
I mean, I thought this was going to be a podcast about like top tips for people to try out tech.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry.
It feels like we started to question like the universe and our role in it as human beings. It's gone quite deep quite quick.
When you start to see it be good, actually good, I was like, oh, okay, well. And also it just doesn't bother me because I'm like, well, I'm not that bothered about being able to, if that can write a better sentence. What I love is better sentences. So if that's what gets to better sentences, then great. But I still think you probably need the human input. You've got to know what you want to write first. But for lots of business writing, lots of business writing isn't really creative. We're trying to be short and specific and concise, and that's something lots of people struggle with. And this solves that problem.
It does make you think, doesn't it, about like, well, how do you beat the bot? If the bot's going to get better and better at writing, and it's going to get better at writing really quickly, it'll learn your tone and it'll be able to do this really quickly. So then are you better than the bot because of the questions you ask of the bot? So does being able to write really good problem statements and come up with really good questions, is that the skill that you invest in? And I think it's because you could lose confidence pretty quickly with some of these things and go, what's the point in me writing social media copy when the bot could just do it for us? But actually, I think it's like, well, don't try to compete with tech that is accelerating very fast. It's a losing game. I think it's a losing game. But think about, well, what skills become increasingly relevant when that bit of my skill sort of been outsourced to another tool. I used really similar, just in case people want to try a different one, I use Grammarly Go, which has exactly what Sarah says. You can put it in a paragraph and it'll write things for you. I got it to write me a LinkedIn post. It wasn't quite my tone, but it had some of the same functionality that Sarah said, like shorten it, make it more informal, all that kind of stuff, which I quite like seeing. But the thing with Grammarly Go is, I can see it now on my screen. It integrates, like these things, it's a bit like Poised. It integrates into your systems. It's really hard to get rid of it. So now every time I type on like Teams or on my emails, I just see the Grammarly pop up all the time. And I'm like, no, go Grammarly, but not the go Grammarly you're trying to market to me. Like, go, leave me alone. So I do need to do some, go away Grammarly. I do need to do some deleting of some things that I've downloaded for the sake of this podcast.
Oh yeah, me too. I think I've subscribed to about 4 million things. And I was like, at one point I started to think, I need to stop using my email address. Like genuinely, I was like, this is going to be really annoying. So yeah, what we do for our listeners, eh?
Right, we've got a couple more each, everybody. Really quick one that I would recommend trying out if you find you quite like watching video content. So particularly on YouTube. So if one of the ways you learn is by watching video content, really good tool called videohighlight.com. I was really impressed by this. So I took a video. We put all of our weekly Pod Plus sessions onto YouTube. I took a link from YouTube of one of our Pod Plus sessions. I pasted it into Video Highlight, and Video Highlight instantly transcribed our 30-minute Pod Plus session, not only into the exact thing that Sarah had said, because it was Sarah presenting, but it summarised what Sarah had said into headings and bullet points. It made you you're quite succinct and useful anyway.
Did it make you sound good?
Better. Like even better.
Oh.
Like it was
Brilliant.
It was like bullet points. Like it was a headline and then like, here are 5 coach yourself questions, and then I summarised them all. Like really useful. My caveat on this, it didn't work with TED. So TED must have some special coding with the TED Talks that sit on YouTube that meant you couldn't do it with that. But any other YouTube video, and it took, cut, paste, press the button, and then 10 seconds later you've got a transcription. Videohighlight.com, well worth a look.
And so the final AI use case that we're going to talk about today is for coaching. And in lots of ways, I think this is almost the most obvious place, because we know that we want coaching to be more accessible, more affordable, and this is a great way for this to happen. And so I used a tool called heypi.com, and so it's HEY and then PI.com. And it's actually not designed to be a career coach, I don't think, if I've understood it correctly. I think it's designed more to be like your friend, or sort of more like a person to just chat to. But I thought I would ask it some career questions just to see what happened, because I was even thinking today, actually, when I went out to get a coffee, so often when I'm being nosy and I overhear conversations, I hear people talking to each other about their jobs or about their careers. And often I really want to dive in and say, have you listened to episode ... of the Squiggly Careers podcast? It might be useful. Obviously, I don't do that. But I think, we do talk to our friends and our families about our jobs and our careers. And so even though I think there's probably a separate episode in coaching / tech and AI and how it might be useful and when it might not be, I actually thought it might be helpful to try something slightly different rather than a more sort of obvious coaching AI. And I was actually surprised. I was really impressed with the quality of the questions that the AI can ask you. So I used an example of saying, and it is an example, Helen, I promise, feeling a bit stuck in my career, feeling demotivated, I think I want to do something different. So that was sort of my stimulus, my starting point. And it was asking me really good open questions, very good coaching style questions. It was empathetic in style. I felt like it really understood me. I think I could definitely make friends with a robot. I'm so needy. And it also made some quite decent suggestions. So, the sorts of things it started to prompt. I didn't feel like it was patronising or kind of telling me what to do. But, you know, it was sort of saying, well, if this is something you really enjoy, I think I'd put like creativity, you know, could you carve out a bit more time in your day job for that? Or actually, does that feel too difficult to do? So I felt like it was, you know, like an empathetic friend would, listening to what I said, offering me some options, and then sort of letting me explore and kind of seeing where I went from there. I think the things that didn't work for me is I still didn't feel that it was a substitute for a career conversation. But what it is immediate and available. So if you just wanted to have a play with it and you've got an immediate career question, how do I ask for a pay rise? I'm having a really difficult relationship with my manager. You could get some initial thoughts or questions I think would be quite a good starting point for coaching yourself. So almost you might use it to do a bit of thinking, to prompt some thinking. You know, does it give you any suggestions or things you've not thought of for yourself? So it kind of furthers your own thinking. And then I think you could take that into an even more meaningful career conversation. So I can start to see how AI could make career conversations even better. They help you to sort of do more of the hard work for yourself. And we know that's important because then you feel more ownership for your answers and for your actions. The biggest problem I had with it was that the tone was way too enthusiastic for me. There's a lot of exclamation marks and awesome. I don't know why I feel it sounds like that, but that's what I felt like it sounded like. And so after a bit, it got a bit grating. And, you know, I sort of went, oh, this is not quite for me in its current form. But it is also very clear, which I appreciated. At the bottom of the page, it says, you know, this is still very much being tested. It makes mistakes. Don't necessarily rely on this for advice. And so, you know, if you were thinking, well, is this telling me this is the right answer? I thought it was very clear that it's like, oh no, it's making some suggestions. It's giving you some options. It's not trying to tell you what to do, which I do think is a really good thing. So like a lot of our other tools, I could really see potential, even if it's not quite there yet.
So hopefully you found that a helpful listen, everybody. We know we've gone through loads of different tools, so they are all summarised in the pod sheet, which you can get on amazingif.com. If there are other tools that you have tried out that you think we should know about, please email us, Helen and Sarah at SquigglyCareers.com. And when we post this on social media, which will be on Amazing If on Instagram and on our LinkedIn page there, please comment, share, so that other people can have a play with these things. Our perspective is just the more we play, the more comfortable we get, and the more we also see how these can help us and how we might need to help ourselves with our very human skills too. So thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we'll be back again next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.